Hi everyone, and welcome back. In this training video and slideshow, I'm going to go over Pear Deck, and this is more of an intermediate to advanced Pear Deck session. If you would like to go back to more of the Pear Deck 101, the basics, then there is a link to that at the end of this presentation, and you can definitely watch that and learn some of the basic skills. So we're going to build on what we learned in the 101 session here and give you some ideas for how you can use Pear Deck a little bit more creatively, as well as leverage some of the more advanced features to support your students, whether you're teaching in person, online, or a combination of both. So goals for this specific session are building upon your basic Pear Deck skills, practice using advanced features within Pear Deck as a student, but then also as a teacher. I'll give you time to do that at the end. And then experiment ways that you can use these advanced features in the future and set a goal for yourself to do that. Pear Deck is an interactive presentation tool, so it changes your static slideshow presentations into a more dynamic, engaging experience for your students, and that you can insert questions, have them reflect mid-lesson, and really build in some formative assessment opportunities for students, all within a Google Slideshow presentation. So Pear Deck, why and how does this connect to the Universal Design for Learning framework? I put the little chili peppers on here to kind of indicate some exciting, fiery ways that it connects to the UDL guidelines, and there's lots of them. I won't go over every single one of them, but just know that Pear Deck is a great way to give students options in these different areas. It allows students to check in and kind of sustain that effort and persistence so they understand maybe something that they need to review on, or is a way for them to reflect if you build in some social emotional reflection type of questions. It's great in terms of options for representation as well. It is a formative assessment tool, so it builds in the really quick opportunity to check for comprehension. There's also the ability to draw within Pear Deck and to also record and insert audio, which makes another option for your students when they're looking at slides. And the last one, in terms of action and expression, Pear Deck provides great opportunities for your students to build those executive functioning skills, again, because it's a place for them to reflect and enhance their capacity to monitor progress within a presentation. But it's also great for just giving students choice in how they can show their understanding and physically navigate. There is a drawing feature on Pear Deck. There's typed responses. It's a way to get feedback from students and have them respond that maybe is an alternative to speaking out on a Google Meet or raising their hand in class, something that's a little bit less intimidating for some of those students. So now is the opportunity for us to kind of review and then experiment some of the new tools in Pear Deck as a student. So you have two ways that you can do this. I have put a link here. You can also scan it on your phone. And what it's going to do is open up a Pear Deck session for you that is in student pace mode. It has all of my content, all of my slides, gives you the experience of kind of tinkering with things, but in a student way, and it's on your own pace. It's also showing you how you can use student pace mode with your students. The other thing is that I'm going to open just a live session here and participate on my cell phone just so I can give you some real-time examples of what this looks like from the teacher side of things, rather than waiting for you to watch this presentation later on. So as always, remember, whenever you want to use Pear Deck, it's helpful first that you have the Pear Deck add-on installed through the add-ons menu, and then select Pear Deck. And that's also where you go to begin a session. So if I go over here, I'm going to start a session. If you wanted to join my student paced version of this session, it is there and the code is there. You can scan it as well. But I'm just going to do a live mode right now, which is instructor paced, just so I can show you guys some different pieces. And I am in my session. So if I'm going through these slides with my students, we're just moving along as we usually would. And then we're about to come to a Pear Deck question, all right? So this is an example of a Pear Deck template question. And this is an example where students could type on the screen or they could draw. So if I was the student, I could type out my response using the text box feature. Well, I can't see super well here, or I could illustrate as well. I have some options. And that's another piece to show you here, is that Pear Deck is accessible on any device with an internet connection. So your students don't necessarily have to be using Chromebook or a laptop to take part. They could technically join on a cell phone. So I am on my teacher dashboard view right here. If I wanted to show responses on the screen, see one student's response, which that was me. It's not a super high quality response right there, but I could click this button and it would show all the other students' responses layered on top of each other. But if I wanted to see an entire grid view of all my students, I could see all of them there. I lock screen. That means that students can't edit or change their answer. Their answer stays as it is. Other thing here, if I wanted to quickly add another question, if I click new prompt, I can insert a new Pear Deck question on the fly. It does only give me template options here, so you wouldn't be able to like build a custom question from this menu. And there's some really great, awesome pictures here of examples that you can use. All right. Actually, there is custom questions here, but they are kind of set up already with the Pear Deck logo and watermark and all those pretty things. So if you don't want that, then I would suggest you make the question before. But let's just say I want to add another question here. It adds it on the fly, and then my students, I needed to go back to the other slide. I could, but I can move forward and backward through my presentation. All right. So moving on, here's another example of a Pear Deck slide. And the difference here is that this is not a Pear Deck template slide. So if you attended a 101 session on Pear Deck, we walked you through how you can use a lot of the templates and things that Pear Deck has available to teachers and quickly add those into your slideshow presentation. You don't have to do a whole lot of customization, but there is the ability to make your own custom questions and add your own pictures and make it more personal to maybe some of the language and activities you regularly do with your students in the classroom. So this is an example of that. I used to use kind of an emoji rating scale with my students when I was in the classroom. So I made a Pear Deck question with that. So I just built this question like I normally would in Google Slides. I added pictures, my text boxes. But then what I did is I used a Pear Deck slide. I basically just added a Pear Deck question to this, and it didn't affect my content. So what my students could do here is they could circle their answer. It's a drawing slide. So on drawing slides, they can draw, or they can type out a text response. That's probably my favorite Pear Deck question type because it has both of those options built in. So if I want to see student options, I could see it there again and move along. And I'm going to show you how you can build a custom question here in a second. And the last one is a typed response where students can write sentences and paragraphs and submit their response from there. So if a student is doing that on their device, they see a little green button in the bottom right corner that says answer question. They can type out their response. And they can submit multiple responses. And it shows it there. And if I had multiple students answering this, I could see all their little speech bubbles. Now, when I'm on this view in instructor mode and I'm presenting this to the entire class, it does not say which student answered which of the responses on the screen, just to maintain student confidentiality and not putting like if students put a wrong answer so that other kids don't see that, or just so it's a little bit more private for the student. On my teacher dashboard view, I could see which student answered what. It actually puts their name right below their response. And I can also give them feedback in that view. So whenever I'm finished with my session, you have some options here. It's helpful if you name the session before you get too far into things, but you can also do that at the end. I can open this in a different device if I wanted to. I can make this student pace mid-presentation if I want. This is really helpful if maybe I do this as a live session at the very beginning, but then we don't get to everything and I still want students to answer these questions on their own. I can turn it into a student pace session if I need to. I just want to end the session. I'm going to give this a different name. Save and end the session. And then it's going to publish takeaways, and I'll show you that here in a second. But I just ended this session, so I'm just going to go from there. And now what I'm going to do is if you want to see student results, you go to peardeck.com, and that's where your full comprehensive teacher dashboard is, which is the most helpful place for reviewing student answers, kind of organizing any Pear Deck sessions that you have, and just revisiting your work. So if I go to peardeck.com, I'm going to click teacher login, and you'll use your BCSC Google account to sign in, and you should have a little tiara above your icon, and that shows that you have a premium account. If you don't see that, please email me and let me know so I can get your account fixed. So this is the teacher dashboard. You have some options here. I can just start a lesson from scratch if I wanted to, build a blank new Google Slides presentation and insert Pear Deck questions. Pear Deck pop-up activities are just ready to go quick lesson starter prompts. So it's Pear Deck slides that you can just go right then and there without having to do a whole lot of planning. This is really good for just on the fly if you want to get student responses. And then Flashcard Factory is this Pear Deck vocabulary activity, and I'll show you that here in a few minutes. But it's really fun for building vocab activities, almost like in a game-like setting in your classroom. There's resources and tutorials here, and then there's also all of my recent slides, so I can build from right there, and then again, additional tutorials. So the helpful thing on the teacher dashboard side of Pear Deck is going over to sessions, and that's where I can see all of my Pear Deck sessions. So if they are closed, that means students aren't submitting answers anymore. Student pace means that they're still working, but I'm not presenting it live. And then a live session means that it's one that's going on right now. So if I wanted to end this session, right, I can close it right then and there. And that's the one I just had on the screen for you guys a few minutes ago. And right here is the helpful button. This pulls up your teacher dashboard where you can see student results and give them feedback. So if I hover over this, it should say teacher dashboard view. If I click that, it's going to open up my teacher venue so I can assess student work and check in and see how they're doing. Okay. So again, this is just the one I did with you. So there's not a whole lot of student participants here, just me participating in my own session. So I could go through and look at these slides. Okay. And here is an example of a student response. Okay. I can add notes here if I wanted to. And Pear Deck also gives you some additional tips. It tells me that it's closed. If I wanted to hide the responses, I don't really get to use that option because this is in teacher mode. But if I was using student pace mode, I could hide their work there. So helpful thing is it shows which student answered what. I can give the student feedback. And if I did that, the student gets a notification that the teacher gave them feedback. So that is better if you're doing this in like a live session because the student still has to have this open on their device to be able to see that feedback. I could hide the response so that if I hide the response here, that means that if I present this to my students, this one won't show up at the top. So if it's an inappropriate answer, that's kind of a helpful fix right there. So I could go through, I could look at all of my student answers, see how they did. And if I needed to, I could reopen the session from here. I could export their answers into a spreadsheet, and that really only works well for certain question types. So exporting it into a spreadsheet works really well if you did multiple choice questions. Sometimes it works okay with free response, but multiple choice questions and then number questions are the best ones for that. It does not do very well with drawing questions, obviously, because those are illustrations and don't necessarily transfer over into a spreadsheet. Whenever I'm finished looking at student results here and their feedback, I can click exit. But that is just a brief overview here of how you can look at results from a session. All right, if I had set up a student pace session, so as you know, there's two different types of sessions in Pear Deck. Live session is what we just looked at, and that's called instructor pace. So I'm the teacher, I'm setting the pace that students go through all of these slides. The other option is student paced, which means that the students are the ones determining when they go onto the next screen. They can drop in and out of the session at any point in time. And I, as the teacher, can close it at a certain deadline, but students can still be accessing it without my help up until that point. But I would open the dashboard. We'll just go into this one, even though there's not students on it yet. It's perfectly fine. But it's a similar view to what I just showed you there in the teacher dashboard. The only difference is that it's still active for students because it's in student pace mode. So if students have been working on this presentation, I could see their responses and I could actually see what slide they're on. It would show a little dot here in their name that shows this is the slide they're currently working on. So if I had students answering this, I could see their responses here in real time. And I can also give them feedback in real time here. So this is the helpful piece that you can do is if you see a student answer, there's a little comment bubble, and then you can give them feedback and they see notification on their screen if they still have this slideshow presentation open. If they don't, the next time they come back to this and are working on submitting their answers, they'll get a notification bubble that pops up and says you have new feedback, and they can jump to it from there. So this is just the student pace mode and what the teacher dashboard view looks like here. If I get to a point when I want to end this session so that students can't keep answering the questions, I would just come over here. I can click end, and that means that students can't submit any more answers, it's officially done, maybe it's the deadline for this specific activity. If I just leave the session, then I'm leaving student pace mode, but students can still be answering work. So I would suggest that making sure that you click leave session if you still want them to be working. If you want to end the session so they can't submit any more answers, and you can end it from there. All right, so I'm going to leave that open so you guys can still work through it all. But that's just the basic gist of Pear Deck in the live view, Pear Deck in the student pace mode. I showed you some examples of custom questions here, and now we're just going to look at how you can build those custom questions. All right, so building a Pear Deck session, you can do that through the Google Slides Pear Deck add-on over here at the right. That's also how you start a session, like what you saw me do a few minutes ago. To build Pear Deck question types, there's a couple of options here. The template library is the best way to get your feet wet with this tool. And if you click the template library, it organizes it by what point in a lesson you want to insert a Pear Deck session. Or if there's a certain question type you want to add, like more critical thinking or just checks for how students are feeling. But there's also some here that show specific content areas and are designed for those. So if I wanted to add a question here, I go to the template library, and if I click a question, it inserts it for me. So that's a really quick way to add Pear Deck questions into your slideshow, and they're already kind of set up there for you and are ready to roll. You can technically customize Pear Deck template questions. You can change text here. I can change the pictures if I want to. Just the helpful thing, is make sure that you don't delete the Pear Deck watermark. This is the part that makes it an interactive question. So if you delete this piece, it is just a static slide and students can't do anything with it anymore. That's just the helpful point to remember there. So that is how you can add ready to roll Pear Deck questions. If you wanted to make your own custom type of Pear Deck question, maybe I already have a slide. Maybe I made this slideshow presentation last year and I already have a slide here that asks students a question, but I never had a way to really collect their answers. Now I have Pear Deck, so I could do that. So the example here is that you just build the slide like you normally would. I could type out my question prompt here, add any pictures I want to, but how do I make this interactive for my students? And then it's a true Pear Deck question. There are options here. So on the same Pear Deck add-ons menu, right below the template library, there's the ability to make a slide, a Pear Deck slide, and insert a Pear Deck question type. So the options are multiple choice, text, drawing, and draggables. And if you go a little bit further down in my slide presentation, I show you what each one of those means. But if I wanted to make this specific slide a text response, all I have to do is make my slide like normal, come over here and click text, and it's going to tell me that it's making it a Pear Deck interactive question. And then what it does is adds a little Pear Deck watermark here. So now it is no longer just a static presentation. It's a slide that students would answer and see the prompt to answer it on their screen. So again, just make sure you do not delete that Pear Deck watermark, because if you do, then students can't do anything with the slide anymore. So another example of that is if I wanted to make this an interactive map activity where students can drag and drop the icons here. I would put my map here as I wanted to, add whatever content piece I wanted. Maybe it's, again, parts of the cell, like what I said earlier. And I'm going to make this a draggable question. All right. And you have some choices here. I can determine the size of the draggable button that students will add. I can change the color if I want to. And I can even change the type. So there's math equations here, there's numbers, there's little person icons, and again, some just grammar pieces there. So this is helpful if maybe on my slide I have a paragraph of text and I want students to mark maybe things that surprise them or things they have questions about, then I could easily do that and make this more of an annotating activity within a slideshow. So if I wanted to have them drag and drop something, you can add that there, and you can add multiple. You can just keep going on down the line, and students, you can have up to 5 things that students can add onto this. So I wouldn't add, you can't add more than that, but these are just some of the options you have there, and you can change the colors on all of those and change the size, and just know that it applies to all of them. So you can make this a little bit more interactive. And whenever I'm finished with that, I'll click Update Slide, tells me it's updating it, and then it puts the Pear Deck watermark there, and I can see that the students have 5 different icons that they can drag onto the slide. So that is a helpful piece for making some custom question types. All right. So I'm going to move a little bit further on down the line. The other way that you can really supercharge your Pear Deck sessions is by adding audio to your slideshow presentation. So technically within Google Slides, you can insert audio by insert and audio, but it is a little clunky. There's not an automatic recording tool built into Google Slides. You have to go to an external website, download the audio recording, and then insert it from there. So this is a little bit more efficient in terms of making your Google Slides presentation more accessible in the area of representation, giving your students another way to understand and comprehend the text that's on the screen. So if I wanted to add audio, I'll open my Pear Deck add-ons menu here. And again, add-ons is the way to get to it in Pear Deck. I already have it open. So what I'm going to do is select Add Audio to Slide. And the first time you try and do this, you probably will have to give permission to Google Slides and Pear Deck to use your microphone on your device. But I'm actually going to delete that recording because I don't want it anymore. So if I could record, all I have to do is just click the red record button. I can talk away. You can record up to 30 minutes, and you have unlimited recordings within a presentation. So only one recording on one slide. So one slide, one recording. You can add recordings throughout a whole slideshow if you needed to. And this is a really great tool to use if you have audio recordings that you've saved on your computer as well. You can upload them, which was the option here beside record. So if it's speeches or recordings of a book, you could easily add those in. Whenever I'm finished, I'll click pause and continue recording, delete it, and start over. Or if I'm happy with it, I'll click save. And there it is. And whenever I'm finished, I'll click add audio to slide. And it adds a little watermark here. So on the other slideshow presentations, not presentations, but slides I showed you, I said don't delete the Pear Deck watermark because that makes it interactive. That's what this is essentially, is that it adds the audio file. So if you delete this, then there's no audio on the slide anymore. So I can maneuver this wherever I need to on my presentation. And now when students get to this, they'll see a little audio button and it allows them to listen to the information on here. So the way that I see a lot of teachers using this in a great way is they'll have an audio recording at the beginning of their Pear Deck slideshow that explains to students what the expectations are, instructions for the day, and as well as any reminders that students need in the lesson. I've also seen teachers add this whenever students are using Pear Deck for like the first time so that students have a tip on from their teacher. It makes it a little bit more personal on what to do. So that is another great option. It's also great if you're learning in a remote environment or if you have a sub that day as a way for students to hear what they're supposed to be doing from you if you're not physically there and present with them. All right, we already did go over custom questions. I got a little ahead of myself. But there are also some fun ways that you can use Pear Deck that are a little bit more low stakes activities to build community and have some fun. So here are some examples of ways that you can do that and some creative ideas that I crowdsourced from expert Pear Deck users across the country and across our district. So an example here is a great way to start a lesson and have some fun with Pear Deck and maybe orient your students to this type of question type is doing a little I Spy game. So I just found this on Google Images. I added it to my slide, and then I set it up as a Pear Deck interactive slide so that students could drag to whatever I was saying as I spy with my eye, little eye. On here, they would drag to that on the screen. So this could be fun maybe if you're doing this with students live. One student says, I spy with my little eye, Mickey Mouse, and then the students could drag it to the Mickey Mouse on the screen. Asynchronously, maybe you're having them look for something related to the lesson of the day, and you tell them and they have to find it. Could just be a fun little activity for students. Other ideas here is asking students a little bit about themselves. Again, this is another great way to build in and get students familiar with Pear Deck with something that isn't necessarily associated with your content. So ask students about themselves, and it's a great way for them to share about themselves if maybe turning on their microphone or raising their hand in class is something that is a little intimidating for them. And there's lots of examples on how you can build some of these fun community activities in with Pear Deck. If you go to the Temple Library, the SEL examples here. Social emotional learning has some, but I also just pulled some of these from, if you just Google Pear Deck relationship building, classroom building ideas, there's some examples that pop up that are fun. All right, so moving along, some examples of how you can really supercharge Pear Deck even more. So another type of way you can add media into Pear Deck is you can embed websites into your Pear Deck presentations. Now there is a caveat to this. Pear Deck allows you to embed websites into your slideshow. Some of them are set up to embed really easily. Other ones take a little bit of maneuvering with the embed code to get it to work. So an example of how some websites embed really well into Pear Deck are the ones I have on the screen. You don't have to do any fancy manipulation with a QR code. All you need is the link and add that and you're good to go. Those ones are Padlet, Flipgrid, Google Docs and Google Sheets, Google Earth, Wakelet, ThingLink, and Kahoot. So if I wanted to quickly take my students to an assignment they're supposed to be doing, which is in Flipgrid, I could do that. So I'd log into my Flipgrid, pull up the specific grid I want my students and topic I want them to answer, and then I click share. All right, and I click copy. Okay. So why am I doing this? What is the benefit of adding in and embedding a Flipgrid website? So yeah, technically you could just insert a link here and the students could click and go to that. But the helpful thing with this is that if you're wanting to minimize the tabs that your students are clicking through and minimize the opportunity for them to get lost and confused because they have so many tabs open on their device, this is the helpful way to do that. So what I would do is add a blank slide here. And in my Pear Deck's add-ons menu over here, I'm going to click website. And then I'm going to paste that link that we copied from Flipgrid. And it'll give me a little preview here so I can see. All right. And I'll update my slide. Okay, so this is what it looks like for me on the teacher side of things. I just see that the website's here across the bottom. On my teacher view, and I'm just going to pull that up really quickly here. And where's our Flipgrid? Here it is. So this is what it looks like for the students. Okay, so here was my slide. If I had typed out text on this slide, maybe instructions for the students, it would still show up here. I didn't in this example. But the Flipgrid pulls up here is a little split screen for your students, which is really helpful so that they could just answer this Flipgrid question here and do this activity without having to open another tab. So this is the benefit of embedding and using the website question type on Flipgrid, not Flipgrid, using the embedding and website question type on Pear Deck so that your students don't have to navigate to multiple tabs. It is all right here for them, and they can easily answer these questions. There's not the ability to directly embed every single website so it appears all nice and fancy like this one, but there is the potential for some other ones that I didn't show. Okay, so there's other ways to embed some websites onto Flipgrid. You just have to manipulate the embed code a little bit. So I give instructions on how to do that, and I'll walk you through it here in a second. And these are some of the websites you can use that for. And these are some fun, cool websites if you haven't checked them out. And what it allows you to do is, again, have something similar to what we did with Flipgrid there, where it just shows up directly on the student's screen. We're going to go to this simulation website. I'm going to show you an example of how you can embed simulation. And this is one of the examples of websites you can embed onto the Pear Deck. So go to the website. Let's do a chemistry one. All right, so here are some of my examples. And let's do building a molecule. Okay, so typically what you might think is that you can just click embed and you're good to go from there. And that would work in a normal way of embedding content like in your It's Learning course. But with Pear Deck, we do have to just manipulate it ever so slightly. And what we're going to do is we're only going to take a portion of the embed code and put that into our website feature on Pear Deck. So what I'm going to do is click the website button. We're only going to copy the bit of the embed code that's in between the quotation marks. So if I'm looking here, that is this section. And I don't need the width and all of those pieces. Okay, so I'm only going to take the section that is in between these quotation marks, and I'm going to click copy. Okay, the other thing that you could do is copy all this embed code, and when you come back over here to Flipgrid, delete what you don't need. But I'm just going to paste that there, and it's going to give me a loaded, after it finishes processing, it's going to give me that simulation. So if I click update slide, now what we're going to do is if I come back over here into this session, all right, it made, there we go. It embedded the simulation directly into my slideshow presentation. And this was a different one that I had already built in here for you because I wanted to show you how to do it. But it's helpful so that my students, again, they could have instructions over here on this side. Maybe it's reminders from me on what to do, but it's almost like they're in split screen mode so they can do this activity without having to worry about opening another tab. Another great idea for adding Pear Deck into your slideshow presentations is making virtual trips within the presentation as well. So what I could do is easily add Google Earth, use that as a website, and make it a website interactive Pear Deck slide so that it's in this like little split screen mode that we were looking at here with the simulation. And what I could do is build it so the students are like walking around in Google Street View or Google Earth, and then on the slide I have questions. So the ability to do that is, again, through the process that I just walked you through with adding websites. All right. So again, helpful things here with Pear Deck and feedback. The teacher dashboard is your best friend for looking at student feedback in Pear Deck. And the way you get to that is all through the Pear Deck website, not just a little Google add-ons menu. So if I go to Pear Deck and I sign in using the teacher login, I can view all of my sessions. And I showed you how you could add feedback to the student, just write some comments on there. But if I wanted to give them a little bit more comprehensive feedback and give them a piece that they could use as a reflection tool, there's a really great feature in Pear Deck called takeaways. And what takeaways are is a Google Doc that has all of your slides on it from a Pear Deck session. It shows students all the things you went over. It gives them a space at the top of the Google Doc where they could write notes and reflect. And it also shows all of their answers to the Pear Deck questions, which is really great for the students to reflect on. Maybe you use Pear Deck as an assessment tool and use that as like a quiz for your students, and you give them the opportunity to correct it, then this tool could help them correct it and reflect on questions they missed. Or maybe they use that if it wasn't a quiz and it's a formative assessment tool to help them prepare for a quiz or something along those lines later on. So by default, you can have it turned on to anytime you do a Pear Deck session, it will automatically create that takeaway document for your students and share it with them. I can show you how to do that. But the other way, you can always turn on takeaways to students after you finish the session. You can't send the takeaways Google Doc to students until the session is officially ended. That's a helpful piece. You can't do that mid-session or mid-live synchronous option. So if I wanted to turn on takeaways for my students by default, so anytime I do Pear Deck, they have the opportunity to get that document sent to them. I would go to peardeck.com, click my little profile and sign in, and click my account, and then go over to settings. So once I'm on settings, this is where I have some features I can turn on or turn off for my students. I would recommend turning on Immersive Reader, by the way, that allows your students to have the slides and the information in your slideshow read aloud to them. It's an accessibility suite tool, and it's one that's made by Microsoft, but it is amazing. It's kind of like Read and Write for Google, but it's designed specifically to be used well with Pear Deck and Google Slides. If I scroll a little bit further down, this is where they have the option to turn on takeaways. So if I turn this on, anytime I do a Pear Deck session, it will automatically send that takeaways document to my students. You don't want to turn that on for every single time, then you can leave it off. And what I can do is if I go to my sessions, I can always send students Pear Deck slides from there. So if I go to this one that we were just doing a few minutes ago, and click this document, I click takeaways. It will send the takeaways to the students. You don't have to do anything. As long as they were signed in with their BCS Google account, they will get that doc sent to them. They have editing rights on it. You also receive access to that as well, because what it does is it makes a folder in the teacher's Google Drive and it has all of the student takeaway documents in there. So you could pop in, give them some notes, give them some constructive feedback, and kind of use that as a working document in reflection tool. So that's why I love this piece, is it really allows you to build on the content and the learning afterwards. And it always shows you here, takeaways in Drive. If you didn't have takeaways turned on already, it would give you the prompt there to send the takeaway to the student, and you would click send. It does take a few minutes for that to process. But if I had students who had participated here, it names it after your session. All right. And you hover over it, then it shows you the name of the student. So this is just the blank one. It always sends you a blank copy, so you can make copies of it if you need to. If a student didn't get what they needed, or if you wanted to use that as your teacher working copy, and then it gives you all of the student responses here. So if I open this, I can see, always gives you the note space here for a summary of the session, and then the questions and spaces for students to take notes. It also puts any hyperlinks that you have on your slides on here as well, so students have quick access to those links too. So this is just the takeaways piece and is really helpful for note-taking and reflections afterward, and I hope that's one that you would decide to use. The last thing I'm going to show you today is a fun game within Pear Deck, and it's called Flashcard Factory. This is great for building vocabulary, reflecting on vocabulary, and just some fun pieces there. So you can only start a Flashcard Factory game if you go to peardeck.com and log in with your teacher account. And then over here is where it says Pear Deck Vocabulary, and that's where you can start a game. Right? And the game is kind of similar to a combination between, I would say, Kahoot and Quizlet Live, in that your students are working on studying vocab, and they could work as a team on this activity. So what I would do is I would give this a title. And then I can type out all of the vocab terms here and the definitions for my students. However, a lot of you are Quizlet users. If I wanted, I don't have to type out every single one of my vocab words if I already have them type out in Quizlet. I would go to Quizlet and I'm going to go to my study set. So here's an example of one we can use. And I already have all of my text and my definitions typed out here. And what I'm going to do is right below the study set, there's a little 3-dot button, and I'm going to click export. All right. And from there, it's going to show me, and it's set by default to tab a new line, and that's what you want. You don't have to change anything there. If I go a little bit further down, it has all of my vocab words on the left, and then the definitions here on the right. I'm going to click copy text. And I'm going to leave Quizlet. I'm going to come back over here to Pear Deck, and I'm going to do import. What we're going to do is paste all of that text that we just copied and exported from Quizlet here. So I'm going to click paste. You can Control V and paste it. And what it did is magical things happening here. I have my term and my definition. I don't have to sit here and type out all of them. If I'm happy with the way that looks, I'll click import. Thing to know here is that if you use this feature, it does not transfer over pictures from Quizlet. There's not a picture feature built into this tool. And partly because a part of this game for students is they have to make their own illustration for the vocab term. So whenever I have finished setting up the terms here that my students are going to study, but if I click Flashcard Factory and play it, then we are going to go into the live version here. Okay. And similar to Pear Deck, like I showed you earlier, this version actually does work best if it's live. So your students would need to be in the same session here. And it works best if you have a couple of students playing, because it is a collaborative type of game. Okay. And whenever you're good to go here, other options on the screen, you can skip to different points in the game, or you can leave and the game's active for your students to play a little while afterwards. But because it is a collaborative game, it does work best if you're playing it in a similar time frame. So whenever I'm finished here, I'm actually going to open this in another tab just so you guys can see what this looks like from the student side. All right, and what students see on their screen before you start the session is instructions for what they're going to be doing. So they're going to be working with a group and they're going to make their own flashcards. So you've already given them the words essentially by typing them into the flashcard factory game, and what they're going to do is make a definition and a drawing for each one of those terms. And as a group, they're going to make those, and at the very end, the class is going to vote on which ones they think are best. So it's kind of a game here. The best drawings and definitions are the winners. Okay. So whenever I'm good to go on the teacher side of things and I have students who have joined, I'll click clock in, and then it shows me my students' teams. Okay. So if I wanted to change this, I could click shuffle teams and it would move them around. You can't manually move them into different groups. It's all just through whatever Pear Deck decides to do. So if I look over here on my student tab again, it tells me, and you don't have to have a whole class play. You can play kind of in this individual mode as well, because I'm joined on 2 different devices here and they're on separate teams. However, it does work. It's more fun if you play with more students. Whenever I'm done on this, on the teacher dashboard, I'll click Let's Play. So after I have clicked play, this is what it looks like on the teacher side of things. And I only put 2 vocab words in this example. So these are the 2 vocab terms my students will be working on. And I see an example over here of the number of terms that they've come up with and finished. And then whenever I have 2 out of 2 or whatever number you're using, then we would move on to the next phase. So in this first activity, I'm going to pull up another window here. This is what it looks like for the students. So some students are going to be given the task to create a drawing for that term, and the other students are making a definition. So I'm going to add a drawing here. This is not going to be that great. All right. Whenever I'm finished, I can also add text here if I wanted to. It's helpful if they don't put the definition or the word itself. But whenever I'm finished, I'll click I'm done drawing. And then I get the next one, the next vocab word. And this one, I'm writing an example. So of that word. And I have the definition here. And then whenever I'm finished giving my example of that word, I'll click I'm done writing. All right. If I'm happy with it, I think it looks good, then I'll do ship it. Okay. And now I'm moving on to the next word. So in this one, I'm going to do another drawing. These are pretty terrible, but hopefully your students are more artistic than I am. Okay, and whenever I'm happy with that, I'll click ship it. Okay, so right here, I would wait for the teacher to move us on. So if I finish this faster than maybe what another group of students did, then I can wait. And then I see kind of those words going across here if I'm the teacher. And if I know that all of my students have finished playing this game and I have all of their answers, I'll move on to the next phase, which is quality control. So at this point, what we do as a class is we'll see the term on the screen and I'll tell my teacher that we're good. And what the teacher does is the teacher would vote on the one that they think is best. So I've seen people do this in different ways. The class takes a vote and they say if they like this example or if they think that maybe it's not the best one. I'm the teacher, I can click on different ones here so I can show students all of the options for the terms. We can pick the one we think is best. Or if you're trying to impress the teacher, then what the students do in that example is the teacher is the sole one who picks which one is best. So you can kind of do it different ways. You can do a collaborative one or more of an individual one. So if I like this one, but maybe I think the other one deserves more work. All right. Then what we see here at the end is the points. So whenever I'm finished with the game, then my students would see who the winner is. And if I played the game Gimkit, and you can play another game after that, but the game is pretty much finished from there. That's a really great expansion because it gets students to draw and to visually represent the vocab terms, but also come up with real life examples of those terms as well. Okay, so last piece here is just for you to kind of brainstorm some of the things we've talked about today and think about how you can use Pear Deck in your setting and your role. I've linked additional resources here. The Pear Deck beginner session materials are linked, as well as some different ideas on how you can use Pear Deck in the classroom. and examples from specific subject areas. So if I showed you some here that you were like, oh, it's a great idea, but I want to see how it looks like in a biology classroom or a math classroom, there are some examples and resources here. If you have questions, as always, let me know. And thank you so much again for visiting this session. And I'm excited to hear and learn how you use Pear Deck with your students.